I used to welcome hunger. I would say, welcome, my friend. If I feel you, then I know that the thing I want, which is fat to be burned, is happening. And so I'm grateful to you. I'm grateful that you're here.
All right, Tom Bilyeu, you walked through my gym on the way into this room, and you said that it made you angry.
That is exactly what I said.
It's
all true.
You're someone that, I mean, do you hate health and fitness? Like, why does it make you angry?
I resent that I have to work so hard to optimize my brain and body. It's one of those where I am, screaming at the void in the sky just because I want it to be easier. I don't find myself in any way, shape, or form drawn to working out or thinking about diet. It's just so important. And so if I could discard it, I would, but alas, I cannot. And so that's where the resentment comes from, that I have to engage with it on a daily basis, even though I don't inherently find it that interesting.
Yet you had your own massive weight loss. You built one of the most successful food companies that anyone probably knows of watching this channel. I mean, that doesn't add up. How does someone that hates health and fitness, well, we'll talk about the food side in a minute, because I can understand how someone that maybe doesn't like health and fitness or doesn't like how it comes easy to people can still go through their own sort of transformation and weight loss. But let's double click on that for just a second. So you told me before you lost 60 pounds, right?
Yep.
I mean, what did that look like? Big umbrella view, and then kind of unpack it a little bit. After today's video, if you are trying to change your lifestyle or make any change to your diet, one of the most important things you can focus on is your gut. So that is a 25% off discount link for Seed. That is a daily symbiotic. So they're a big sponsor on this channel. If you want to say thank you to this channel, the best way you can do that is supporting our sponsors that allow us to do what we do. So this is a capsule inside of a capsule technology with a prebiotic and a probiotic. So when you take it, you get the potential proper colonization, the proper staging of the prebiotics and then the probiotics going where they're potentially supposed to go. So anyway, that link saves you 25% off your entire order with them. So make sure you check them out if you're looking for a good probiotic. And again, it's literally the only probiotic I recommend, literally the only one, because most of them out there are a couple of strains and are complete nonsense. So that link is down below underneath this video.
Well, so the most important thing to understand about the way that I look at this is if an entrepreneur comes to me and is like, hey, I really want to do something great with my life, the first thing I say to them is get control of your body. Because if you can transform your body, you'll be able to stick with the difficulty of building something in business, anything that takes that kind of endurance, discipline, just seeing something through. And so changing my body has been the most mentally transformational thing I've ever done. And so for me, the body really is just a gateway to the mind. And of course, you have to get control of your mind in order to do the things with your body that you want. So I went on a seafood diet when I was trying to add muscle. And I added muscle, but I also slathered on the fat. And I remember I was about to see a friend that I hadn't seen in years. So she had not seen me since before I started lifting. And so I was so excited, you have no idea. And I put on my tightest t-shirt and I went to see her with my wife, and I'm expecting her to be like, oh my God, you put on so much muscle, it's incredible. And she doesn't say a word. And so that night I'm like, baby, how'd she not say anything? This is crazy. And my wife looks at me and she goes, oh, maybe she just thought you got fat. And I was like, wait, what? I was like, hold on, is that what this looks like? And she was like, well, maybe that's how it would read for some people. I was gobsmacked. So I was like, whoa, I've really let this get out of hand. And so all I could see was that I'd been putting on muscle, and I wasn't noticing that I had actually gotten pretty fat. And so that night I took my before pictures and I said, okay, whatever it takes, I'm gonna get lean, I'm gonna get six-pack abs, which I had promised myself when I was a chubby kid that one day I would have six-pack abs, but I had obviously to that point not achieved. It took 2 years, many fights with my wife, absolutely hating my life because I did it all the wrong way. But I got the six-pack abs and it was awesome. And dude, okay, so I've made a lot of money in my life. If I'm really honest, probably the peak emotional moments, not the most meaningful thing that's ever happened to me, but the peak emotional moment was I had lost all the weight. I was at a pool party. This woman swam across the pool, gets up, comes out, looks at my wife and goes, can I pet your husband's abs? And my wife's like, yeah, sure. And so she's like, oh my God. And I was like, okay, I made it. Like, this is amazing. So it's like, despite all of my success, there's something in our brains that is so hardwired to want to look and feel good and to be strong and to be capable. It is an evolutionary algorithm that's running. And so that therein lies my frustration. It's so powerful, but it takes so much time and energy. And it just isn't the place that I want to spend. But anyway, going through those 2 years to actually lose the weight, to be disciplined, to know, and again, I did it poorly, so I didn't need to suffer as much as I did, but it was still potent to see how much suffering I could endure. And so I was basically doing it through rabbit starvation. And so for 2 years, I took in, it had to be 85% of my calories were protein. You know that I shortened my life doing that. You know that I had joint pain and that I was doing all kinds of cellular damage. It was terrible, but I went through something very hard. I got leaner than I'd ever been in my life. Talking to someone like you or the people listening to the show, I wasn't shredded, let's be honest, but I was very lean. And so it was incredible. And it was really powerful to know I'm in control. If I don't eat that thing and I go lift and I go do cardio, I'm going to be able to sculpt my body and get the results that I want. And so when people say that, oh, something is hard or whatever, I'm like, yes, it is hard, but it is doable. And so it's one of those where I'm completely unreasonable because it can be done. It can be done. And it really is a game of willpower. And I don't know about your audience, my audience, when I say that, dude, the comments will get lit up. You don't know my situation. Yes, I do. And you can do it. And I get it. People will spill into orthorexia or just outright bulimia, anorexia, whatever, but it is possible. And you can get control of your mind and you can get control of your body. And once you prove that to yourself, many, many other things become possible. But it is yet amusing to me that when I walk through your gym, I am angry.
So when you say it gave you an element of control, allowed you to feel like you had control in other areas of your life.
It gives you an element of control.
Would you equate that to the discipline that you sort of harness from that, and it's just directly applicable into other avenues of your life?
For sure.
Would you say that's the most important piece?
No, it's the second most important piece. The first most important thing is what I call the only belief that matters. The only belief that matters is that if I put time and energy into getting better at something, I will actually get better at that thing. Everything in your life is downstream of that belief. If you hold that belief, you'll be able to accomplish a lot more than even yourself just without that belief. Because if you believe putting time and energy in the gym, and this is why I say I'm completely unreasonable when people push back, if you believe, oh, no matter how much time, I'm a hard gainer, bro, I can't add muscle, or I can't lose fat, you don't understand, I have a condition. It's like, okay, I fully accept that it's harder for you, maybe even a lot harder for you, and that I understand if you have resentment. But I will ask one simple question, now what? Do you just give up? Or do you say, even though it's harder for me, I'm going to go do this thing? And so that's what I'm trying to harness in my own life. So that I would say is the most important. And then once you have that belief, you then have to harness the discipline to actually stick with it. Because the nice thing about changing your physique is you're wearing the scoreboard. And so it's just clear. Either you can lift the weight or you can't. Either you have the fat on your body that you don't want or you don't. And you look the way you want to look or you don't. And it's just that simple. And why don't you have the results you want? Because you're not doing the right things. And I don't say that to judge myself, and I certainly don't say it to judge anybody else. I hate doing it. So I completely understand if people are like, I have no interest in that. Cool, go live your donut life. Full respect. But, and I literally mean that. I don't judge people for that. The vast majority of my family is morbidly obese. I love them. No judgment whatsoever. But there are realities to be faced. If you are overweight, odds are almost 100%, not entirely, but almost 100% that you're going to have high inflammation, which is going to have all kinds of problems, including pain. So yeah, it all matters. But the two important things are the only belief that matters and then discipline. And you really can't apply it to everything else in your life.
It's interesting because when people first lose a bunch of weight and they say, everything in my life is going better, I feel better, and it was all just a result of X, Y, Z. And they kind of list physical things. And my first thought is usually exactly what you had just described. It's like, no, I think you started to control aspects of your life, and it gave you a taste of, hey, I can control this. And then you maybe nonchalantly started applying it to a different area of your life. Maybe you didn't even realize it, right? People say, okay, let's just use tracking food for a simple example. I'm not a big fan of tracking food, but a lot of people do it and it works, right? Because they're systematically now journaling what they're eating. Well, they take that same sort of plasticity that's happened in their brain, and maybe now they're doing a similar thing in their work life or in their relationship. Or maybe there's just indirectly, they're feeling better about themselves in a given way, so they have the confidence to handle a situation differently. And it's so easy to get wrapped up and think that it's all these physical things that are happening, and they are. Those physical things are clearly happening. I mean, the reductions in inflammation, obviously the adipokines, all these things, like that's going to make an impact. But I'm with you on the discipline piece. I think that once people get a taste of that discipline, they get a taste of something that maybe they've never experienced before, and it feels very foreign, and it feels like a drug. And suddenly, things are in sight that weren't in sight before, because they have a different lens in which they're looking at life, right? So when you were trying to build muscle, you were like Cartman beefcaking it, so to speak, and I've used that a lot because I was very similar. In fact, a similar thing my grandma said to me, it was a couple years before she died. She was very old, and I had gained a bunch of weight, and she said something to me. I said something along the lines of like, I'm not fat, and her words back to me were, well, you're not front fat, but you're fat. And it was like, that was a very important moment for me, because I was like, yeah, I didn't have this big gut, but I was just soft and fat, right? And so it was a very similar kind of thing. But anyhow, I mean, my point with this is when you were beefcaking it, one could say, okay, well, that was a very strategic move to try to build muscle. But was it? Or was it lazy?
Yeah, I mean, I wouldn't say it was lazy, because I really was trying what I thought was the right thing. And earlier I referred to it as a seafood diet. It was, if I saw food, I ate it. I was trying to get as much protein, not as much, but I had a goal for my protein, and I was trying to hit that. So I was eating a lot of clean food. It wasn't like I was just eating junk food, but I certainly had my fair share of that. But yeah, it was a really uninformed way of going about it. I was doing shots of olive oil to get my fat up. For years, I couldn't drink Diet Mountain Dew because I couldn't stand the taste of the olive oil. So I would put it in Diet Mountain Dew and try to like swig it back. It was just ridiculous. Young, dumb, 20-something stupid stuff that you do when you don't know any better. And I didn't even really notice that I was getting fat. That was a crazy thing. Like, I was really broadsided by, oh wow, the fat is far more noticeable than the muscle, because I was getting strong, and that was intoxicating in its own right. And so yeah, it was just wasn't pure stupidity, and it certainly wasn't laziness, but it was not like now, and we have to put this in context. When I was doing it, if YouTube existed, it was not a thing. Like, I didn't go on YouTube. And it certainly wasn't what it is now, where you can just find an unimaginable amount of information. Because this would have started lifting in like 2003. So this is pretty early. I can't remember what year YouTube is formed, but it's either after that or that would be in its first years. So there just wasn't, like, I used to walk around with Arnold's bodybuilding encyclopedia or whatever it was called. And then there was another one, Body by Jake or something like that. I can't remember. But anyway, I had these books, and that was what I used to try to figure out what lifts I should be doing and all that stuff. So anyway, it was not scientific the way that kids could do it today.
So, okay, so you used essentially what's called protein-sparing modified fasting, which is rabbit starvation.
Yes. That's to lose the weight.
Yeah, definitely not to build it. Definitely, I'm flashing forward here. So, arguably one of the most effective like medical weight loss strategies that's out there. I'm not sure if you know that, but it's like, that is like, if someone were to go into like a clinical setting to lose weight, that's essentially what they'll put them on. I mean, it's very aggressive and it works. And it's, it comes with side effects, but generally speaking, during that phase, not that I'm saying everyone watching this video should go out and do that. I will honestly say that I go through periods where I do PMSF or PSMF, where I'll take that like fats, strip them down, take the carbs, strip them down, keep the protein extremely high. Periods of time, that can be effective, but never more than like 2 weeks or so,
Yeah.
right? How long were you doing it?
2 years.
Yeah.
Yeah, my joints were a nightmare. I had to ice my wrists every day. And some of that was there before I started doing it, but I was very surprised that when I cleaned up my diet during that time, because I'm a freak of discipline. Like once I set my mind to something and I draw a bright line, that's it. I'm not going to deviate. And so literally for 2 years, with precious few exceptions, I was just religious about what I ate. And I couldn't understand why I still had to ice my wrists. I was like, man, my diet's so clean. I always thought the inflammation was from the sugar and the carbohydrates. And here I have virtually none, and I'm still super inflamed. And it was coming out of that because I was still in the mentality, if you eat fat, you get fat. And so when I first heard from Peter Attia and Dom D'Agostino, no, you need to eat fat. Like it's gonna be good for your joints and all this stuff. And I was like, what? Like that was really foreign to me. And so I then did keto, and I did a 4-to-1 keto, which I would not recommend. It was horrific. I had keto flu to the max, but my wrist stopped hurting within like 72 hours. It was crazy. It was like taking a drug. And so I was like, whoa, okay, this makes a very big difference. So maybe in way smaller quantities, it's perfect and exactly what people should do. Anecdotally, for 2 years, it got me lean as hell, but it was misery.
So it took you the full 2 years to lose that 60 pounds?
Yeah.
So were your calories pretty aggressive, or were like aggressively dropped, or were you keeping the protein so high that your calories weren't?
No, my calories were tight. So my calories would have been around anywhere from 1,400 to 1,700, depending on if I was really being driven crazy by how hungry I was, because I was hungry all the time. Like to give you an idea, my wife and business partners pulled me aside and were like, you don't have a personality anymore. That's a quote. So it was like I was just in zombie mode because I was so hungry all the time. All I could think about is when is my next meal? And that's when I realized like I am really good at chronic suffering, like really good. But it was not great. I was certainly underperforming at that point in my life. I was not happy. I was just completely tired, fatigued, starving all the time. But yeah, my calories were low.
Do you think, because I'm this way, and it might make sense that you were too, there's a certain level of kind of this masochistic nature that like when you start feeling hungry, it almost drives you more to go into a deeper deficit or keep thriving with it because it means it's working?
You really want to make people mad.
Yeah.
For sure. Yeah. I used to welcome hunger. I would say, welcome, my friend. If I feel you, then I know that the thing I want, which is fat to be burned, is happening. And so I'm grateful to you. I'm grateful that you're here. When I'm fasting, like let's take a nice prolonged 3 to 5 day water only fast. Always makes me laugh when people count like, oh, I only eat after sundown. Water only fast for 5 days. I will go in the kitchen and sit with people who are cooking, especially if they're cooking something I love, and just feel my stomach nodding. And it is a potent reminder that I'm in control.
So it's freaking wild that you say that, because people have looked at me like I'm crazy when I say like it is easier for me to fast if I'm going to a party or I'm going to a function and I have to abstain, because it was something about abstaining from that food. I felt in control. It's easier for me it'd be harder to be in a vacuum. It's easier for me to be exposed to, well, let's go to a party where all the cookies are there and the food is there and I'm tempted. Like abstaining from that is what I would actually thrive on in a weird, twisted way. And some would look at that and say, okay, well, that's just completely sick and twisted, and maybe it is, but it's that control, right? And it's that same control that we keep coming back to.
Call control. So control, there's something about that word that weirds me out a little bit. Yes, for sure, and that there is an echo of if you have discipline, you have control. For me, the thing that I feel when I'm doing it is I feel like I am a superhuman, that I can do things, I can endure things that other people can't do or endure. And if any one of those people came up and talked to me, I'd be like, oh my God, like nothing but love, no judgment, all that. But when I'm there and I'm watching people eat things and I'm like, whoa, ha, ha, like I can stop myself from doing that. Like there's a real dark energy to it. So you have to be very careful. You don't want to spend too much time in the dark energy, but wow, that dark energy is super powerful. And so it does make me, control is a part of it. I'd be lying if I said that it wasn't. But it's that sense of like, I can do anything.
So then why do you think it makes you hate it so much now?
Well, that's the working out part. So what I love mental games. When a game is mental, like when I walk, so part of my house is our business. And so when I walk through the part of my house that's my business, I don't resent that because that's the mind game. And I love playing that game. I love challenging myself. Can I solve this business puzzle? Can I pull this off? And so that to me is really joyful. But I don't get the same, so one, I get injured a lot in the gym because there's some disconnect between my brain and the way that I move my body. So I'll constantly like pull my trap, literally constantly. And so the gym for me is everything comes just harder than I wish it would. And so my wife, for instance, whatever that euphoric rush is, the runner's high, my wife gets that. I don't. I don't even know what people mean when they talk about it. But I get it if I do cold exposure. So I'm like, this must be what people experience when they do the gym. So cold exposure for me gives me that, like, I did this really hard thing and I feel awesome in the moment. I don't get that in the gym. I don't know why. So there's just something where my neurochemistry is such that when I lift, the only thing I can anchor on is I feel strong. When I feel strong, that feels good. But then if I injure myself, and there have been a few times where I injured myself where I'm like, is this gonna be forever? And that's scary. So there's this sense being in the gym of like what I'm doing is dangerous. I wish I didn't need to do this, that I could, because honestly, while I do love being in shape and it feels awesome, when you look good naked and you are strong, that feels really good. There is an evolutionary algorithm running in your mind that's going to reward you for that. No one can escape it. That's why when people say, no, I'm fine being overweight, you're just not. No. False. It's just not the way the human mind works. You're not a bad person. You're worthy of love. All of those things, 100%. Like you don't need to change. But I know you're being heckled by a millions of year old evolutionary thing in your brain that wants you to be optimized for physical fitness so you can survive. Anyway, so I wish that I didn't need to spend time on that. But to optimize my brain, to play the games that I do love, I have to optimize my body.
Interesting. So it's almost like Pavlovian in a way. I mean, it's like, let's just pretend for a second that maybe you lack the ability to feel endorphins. It's just like for sake of visualization. So like you go to the gym, you don't get any endorphins. It would make sense if you illustrate it like that, that by simple Pavlovian response, like of course, stimulus response, you're gonna hate the gym, right? Whereas maybe a person that gets at least some gratification out of the gym, they are at least offsetting that a little bit. So would you say that more than 50% of the time, 51% of the time or more that you're in the gym, you are utterly uncomfortable and let's just say miserable?
Yeah, miserable would be a stretch. That would be unfair. But I am 100% of the time wishing I was somewhere else. And this is, so I mean, this might be a glimpse into my personality. So I have way more things that I want to do that I'm deeply passionate about than I could ever do during the day. And in fact, I've never explained it even to myself like this. Okay, so there's a list of things that I'm passionate about that is far longer than I have hours in the day or years in my life. The gym is not something I'm passionate about, but I have to do it. And so now there's this thing that I do that falls into what Jeff Bezos calls overhead, where I'm doing this thing that's overhead. It has to be done. For the rest of my life to work the way I want it to work, I have to go to the gym. But in place of the gym, in place of something that I'm passionate about, I'm doing the gym. And so it's that frustration of I would rather be doing XYZ thing, which is why even when I work out, I listen to a podcast. Probably not the best way to develop your physique, but it's the way that I can bear spending 45 minutes in the gym every day.
It's kind of like almost the dad guilt or the mom guilt, right? It's where it's like, I can say decently from the dad guilt perspective, I can't speak for the moms, but I would much rather be at home with my kids, not missing every milestone, whatever, right, than I would be in the gym. And when my kids were really young, when the milestones were happening much faster, like in, I would feel that way. Like, I don't want to be here. But I feel like this is a box that I have to check for what I do, and I do need to look a certain way. This is part of my brand, but it's also just the overhead of like, yes, I need to do this to feel good, and shifting from being body composition focused to much more just optimized and feeling good. then yeah, it does change. When you start taking the pivot even a little bit away from the body composition side, and it does just become, this is just the overhead of what I have to do, and other things have to take a back seat to that, it's hard not to have a little bit of an unhealthy relationship with it. It feels like, okay, this is a necessity, but I'm missing out on these other things, right? For you, it's those passions, it's those things you want to do. And for me, there's a certain level of that too, although I've learned to love the gym and embrace it. But there's things that are always going to overpower that or supersede that. My kids and my family being one of them. I will always rather be with my family, but I also know, okay, the kids need to see me work hard. They need to see this stuff. They need to see this is important too. They need to see, so all that. I can 100% relate to that. So when you put it in that perspective, I don't look at you like an alien anymore, thinking like, why did you walk through that and say, I hate that place, it made me angry. Now I'm like, okay, I get this, right? And do you think that there's a lot more people that feel that way, but aren't able to put it into words, or they're not able to even wrap their mind around it? I think that this probably just helped a ton of people, because it made me realize that and this isn't because you just don't like working out. It's not that. It's just that you view your life through this lens of like, I'm missing out on doing these things. And that's kind of okay. So that means you've got like big passions and wants, right? What would your words of advice be like for people that kind of feel that way? Like, how do they get around that?
The thing that I'm always trying to get people to understand is you can do anything you want in your life. Not everything, but you can do anything. And so I certainly wouldn't judge them if they totally want to discard working out or being in shape or whatever. But there are no solutions, there are only trade-offs. So if you don't do that, you're going to pay a price. And so I want to make sure that people understand the price. So for instance, every time, and I mean every time my lower back has hurt, it's because I'm not deadlifting. It's not because I'm deadlifting too heavy. Now, I've caused myself problems doing that as well, but I'm just saying, now that I know how to avoid like stupid injuries, when my lower back hurts, I guarantee I've been traveling or whatever, and when I'm traveling, I'm super lazy about the gym. Let me just tell you that right now. So I know that there are people that can like make that work, but for me, if I take too many days off, I'm like, oh, my lower back is hurting. So when I hear people, they're like, oh, I have lower back pain, my shoulders hurt, my this, that, or whatever, their solution is to not do the thing. That's the exact wrong answer. So my thing is, I do this to be protective from a long-term perspective, so just longevity, right? So how much muscle mass you have is predictive of your all-cause mortality, so just being thoughtful about that. Being strong enough to do things is incredibly important. I can't believe, but I am like, 50 is not that far away. And so recognizing that if I want to, I forget what Peter Attia calls this, the octogenarian Olympics or centenarian Olympics, whatever. Okay, if you want to be able to lift airplane luggage over your head when you're 100, then you need to be able to lift X pounds above your head today. And so I take that stuff seriously. So anyway, I'd want people to understand that. Like, I do not pass judgment on people that are overweight. I literally couldn't care less. It will not weigh, it is not a factor in how I weigh someone's value as a human being, but you're making a trade-off. And I worry that it gets so caught up in don't judge me that people are not realizing, ooh, I'm actually making a trade-off here that I wasn't aware of. And so getting people to understand, no, you almost certainly should be in the gym. You almost certainly, for your sake, right? Okay, in fact, I should explain something. All of life starts with your goal. What's your goal? Everything is going to be an echo of that. Your goals make demands. If you want to play with your kids, if you want to play with your grandkids, if you want to be around for your grandkids, you have to be in the gym, you have to eat right. Not because I think there's anything morally better, you just won't live or you won't be able to be active enough. So I would want people to start with what their goal is and then live according to that. And if you're like leaving Las Vegas and you're like, yeah, I want to drink myself to death by 35. Yeah, okay, cool. Doesn't strike me as the wise way to enjoy this one life that we all get, but I'm certainly not looking at it with moral condemnation.
So when you try to look at people that are saying, I'm struggling, I'm trying to find the right sort of path to take as far as diet and whatnot. Since you've talked to so many people, it'd be you're an interesting person to ask this. What do you think the barrier to entry for someone that is embarking on a dietary change or a shift is outside of, say, maybe just their mind. Like, it's a pretty tribal world out there. Like, there's a lot of like, which one do I choose? But I don't think that that's the reason. I think there's something deeper. I mean, based on different people that you've talked to, obesity experts, whatnot, what's your take there?
On what stops people, there is only one thing, but you told me that that's the one thing you want me to set aside. It's their mind, entirely. It's their mindset. Everything is downstream of what I call their frame of reference. So we all cobble together a frame of reference by making choices. We don't recognize them as choices, but they are. And that frame of reference are your beliefs about yourself and the world and your values around how the world ought to be. Now, the bad news is that humans are extraordinarily bad at identifying what's actually true. We are not optimized as an evolutionary creature for truth. We are optimized for survival. Once you understand that your brain is simplifying a hyper-complicated world, okay, so just one example. Have you ever heard of Donald Hoffman?
No.
Okay, Donald Hoffman's a fascinating guy. He believes that you live in a simulation, for sure. Even if that simulation is only created by your brain, doesn't matter. You are in a simulation. And the way he explains it is from an evolutionary lens. He has a mathematical thing that backs this up that I can never hope to explain. But it's like mathematically, he believes that he can prove, or that he has proved, that evolution will not lead to the truth. In fact, it will lead exactly away from the truth. Now, the only thing I can tell you that seems to indicate that he's headed in the right direction is you can look at the things that you can interact with and ask, have I reached ground truth? So what we're seeing all around us is 0.00035% of the available electromagnetic spectrum. And yet, we think of it as, I see everything there is to see. But in reality, you see some tiny fraction. You see way less than 0.5%. I mean, it's tiny. So given that, we look around and think, oh, no, this is everything. I can touch it, I can see it. It's called an Umwelt. Given the sense receivers that we have, touch, eyesight, hearing, temperature, all that stuff, this is how we construct the world around us. But you are constructing the world around you. So your brain is encased in total darkness. Light never reaches your brain. Electrochemical signals are interpreted by your brain that it then represents as light or sound or heat or whatever, but it really is a simulation made by your own brain. Okay, now what do we know about simulations? Simulations are taking a very complicated world and reducing out of it. If it wasn't, what your brain would tell you is there are this many photons in this wavelength reflecting off of that surface. That's mathematically what's actually happening. But instead, you see texture, which is why you have an optical illusion on your door. Your door, for those, hopefully that camera picks it up a little bit over your shoulder, looks like it's chipped paint. But in reality, it's like a sheet or a blanket or something. But my brain at first didn't realize that. Just I kept seeing it out of the corner of my eye. My brain was like, yeah, it's really wood. It's really chipped. And then you realize, oh, I've been tricked. So if my brain is making all of these simplifications and it's filling in the blanks, what's it filling the blanks in with? That's your frame of reference. Is you're making all these subconscious and conscious beliefs about how the world is, what's true, what's not true, how things work, and it becomes the funhouse mirror through which you view the world. Now, the bad news is that none of us realize that we view the world through, in fact, glasses is probably a better metaphor. You see the world through hyper-distorted glasses, but you just think it's the truth. And you don't realize the other person's glasses are completely different than yours. And so you'll be arguing with that person, not realizing that you have either different base assumptions about how the world is, or you have a collision of values, how the world ought to be. But both of you will mistake those beliefs and values for objective truth, but they're not, because you're living in a simulation of your own mind. I don't actually think we're in a simulation, and if we are, it doesn't really matter. But once you realize that, oh shit, like I need to understand how my brain is interpreting all this, all the ways that it simplifies, all the rules of thumb that it slides in, and all the things that it makes me see that aren't really there. And then you can begin to distrust your emotions, which for somebody that wants to make a physical transformation, you have to distrust your emotion. When you feel judged, when you walk into a gym because you know that everybody's looking at you and thinking you're disgusting and fat, it's probably not true. In fact, there will be some people that are judging you, and they may be thinking exactly that thing. But there's probably way more people in the gym that are like, wow, I'm stoked for you. I'm so impressed that you came and showed up, and I remember my first day and all that. Like, it would not be hard for you to find people that will help you, even if you went to Gold's Gym in Venice, like the Mecca of Meccas. I used to work out there, and some people will be a prick to you, I know firsthand, and other people will be extraordinarily kind. So you're playing a thing in your head. So ultimately, your brain is the thing you have to get control of. Step one, distrust your emotions, which nobody does. The only thing I'll get up on a table and bang the table and scream from the rooftops that I am just beyond certain is that people need to stop trusting themselves.
I love that. And it's almost like we look for the validation in whatever category that is, right? So if you feel that way and you trust your emotions so much when you walk into a gym, the first thing that you're going to notice is going to be the person that probably does align with how you feel in terms of they're judging you. That's going to stand out, and that's going to seem like that is the vast majority of people, because that's the one that you have whatever distorted view of, and you're going to pinpoint it and you're going to find it. When in reality, maybe 99.9% of the people don't give two craps that you're there, and another fraction of a percent actually, do care that you're there for positive reasons, and another fraction of a percent do care that you're there for negative reasons. The fact is you're looking at it through very distorted glasses. When you look at people that get along, it's kind of interesting. It's almost as though you're describing two people that have such distorted views of the world and also just perhaps how they view the world. It's so distorted on two ends that mathematically they add up, so they get along. It's like, hey, we see eye to eye. Do we actually see eye to eye? Or do we both see such a distorted view of things that somehow in the middle, mathematically, we add up and we get along?
I have a hypothesis that is people that share values, because collision of values is normally that's where you end friendships. And you're able to navigate your difference in base assumptions without obviously going, oh, we have different base assumptions. You just figure out, wait, do you mean this? Yes. Oh, okay, cool. Now I get you, right? So they're high-level communicators. They lead with kindness, and they want to understand where you're coming from. With that kind of thing, if you lead with kindness, you care about that person, you really do want to understand them, as long as you share values, you'll be okay. But what we're witnessing today is how quickly tribes begin to break along value lines. And when people don't share values and they lean into a feeling of wanting to find and identify and be a part of their tribe, it really can and does lead to violence.
Perfect introduction to the world of the diet tribes, because I think there's a lot of collision of values there, or a supposed collision of values, or where someone very wise and close to me kind of put it in a really interesting perspective. And they said diets are almost like musicians or bands, right? Like you get, well, this diet got me through this time. This band, listening to metal, got me through the toughest times of my life. And then the band breaks up, or the lead singer splints off and goes solo, and you just feel like what the heck, right? Same thing kind of happens like when someone bashes the diet that's worked so well for you, right? But if you were to talk to someone that had the same exact transformation as you, same exact weight loss, they lost 60 pounds, they lost 100 pounds, whatever, but they did it via another way from you, there would be this collision of values in terms of how, to a lot of people, not to everyone, but to a lot of people on the surface, you got there via this route. What's wrong with you? Why would you do this? And there's this, whether it's politicized, whether it's broken down, religion, whether it's anything, right? There's these different silos that diet now gets broken up into. And do you think that, in a weird way, this can be motivating and actually helps people? Because there's a lot of people that combat the diet tribes, being like, oh, it's ruining things. But in a lot of ways, the diet tribes also give people some identity, right? They give some people, but is it such a small percentage of people that actually get their identity wrapped up in it that it's really not helping the mass population that needs help with what food they put in their mouth?
There's only one identity that makes sense to me. Every other identity, while fun, runs the risk of getting you in trouble. The only identity I found that has served me is to be that of the learner. Once I started seeing myself as, oh, I'm a learner, I derive my own value from my willingness to learn, then everything opened up in my life. And it was like, oh my God, like this is amazing. I don't need to defend my position. You know something that's better than what I know? Amazing, man, because I've gotten this far without knowing whatever it is you're about to teach me. I'm here for it. That's transformational in a way that people don't understand. And when I see people entrench in wanting to be right, which the vast majority of humanity does, and honestly, even to this day, in my whole life, everything positive in my life is a result of understanding that I should just be the learner. Even then, sometimes I will still find myself like, I'm just trying to be right in this moment. And when I catch myself, I'm like, whoa, that was dumb. But still, there's some evolutionary thing there. I don't entirely know what it is, but we do find ourselves drawn to that. But if you can break away from that and say, okay, cool, I'm the learner. So if somebody came to me and said, oh man, Tom, this idea that you have is really fucking stupid. I'm like, oh, word? In what way? Because one, I value myself for being willing to square up to that and say, cool, I don't need to run from the discomfort here. I want to know in what way you think I was doing something really stupid, because even if you're trying to hurt me with that, if you're trying to be mean, if you really have a good idea, usually people try to hurt you with something true. So it's like, okay, cool, you're hitting me where you think I'm vulnerable with something that's really true. If you can remove that blind spot from me, I'll take it all day long. I just want to know what works. Now, the reason that I want to know what works is on a long enough timeline, I can beat anyone at anything. We both know that's not literally true, but it's good to act as if it were true because you surpass so many people because most people just quit. So I'm just like, cool, you're going to laugh at me now. I'm going to look stupid now. But 5 years from now, 10 years from 15, I'm not going to look stupid anymore because I will have taken that knowledge and turned it into actual usable skill set. And if I can get people to understand that's really what life is about, it's about transforming potential into skill set and using it in a fashion that matters to you and also helps elevate other people. Like that to me is just, it's fulfillment, it is the game. And so in those moments, yeah, I would beg people, like be open-minded. Like if you find yourself like, I'm here to fight for what I believe, you're already in trouble.
So you think that people, or you know the people in this case, that are saying, okay, I'm going to select this one type of diet for XYZ reason because it aligns with sort of my moral code, versus saying, okay, I'm going to look at this diet and this is practical, this makes sense, and this is something that I can adhere to. Am I hearing you correctly? Is that
I'd say something slightly different. So remember, for me, everything starts with the goal. So if your goal is to save animals, if that's what you mean by a moral stance, if your goal is, I'm going to be a vegan because I don't want to kill any animals, okay, word, cool. Remember, I'm here for it. Whatever your goal is, as long as you're not hurting other people, I'm all about it. So now the question becomes, okay, if that's our goal, if that's our North Star, what are the things that we need to do that are actually effective to getting us there? So if you have like, okay, I want to never kill another animal, but I also want to optimize my health. Okay, cool. There are going to be certain things in a vegan diet that might lead to problems. Like if I eat, vegan food, by the way, is fucking delicious. So for anybody that thinks they don't like vegan food, you like vegan food. You just haven't found the things that you like yet. So, but if I eat it unchecked, the things I go for spike my blood sugar like crazy. But oh dear God, is it tasty. So I'm like, okay, wait, I have to balance this out. I want to eat vegan, but I also want to optimize my health. I'm going to need to know what that means. I'll give people my blanket statement, which will piss your audience off. But basically, just let me control people's blood sugar. Like, of course, we can optimize and tweak way more dials than that. But if you let me control their blood sugar, I'm gonna 80% of the way there. So I'm going to be watching myself on that. Like, am I taking my blood sugar too high? Is my protein dropping too low? A few pretty basic things. Cool, get it dialed in, make sure I'm feeling good, clarity of thought, all that, check my blood markers, et cetera, et cetera. Got it. I've dialed in the diet for me, because I think every microbiome is so wildly different. Epigenetics, which we talked about off camera, wildly different. Genetics, different. So as you factor in all those, you get to a hyper-personalized thing. But dude, there are going to be people that thrive on a vegan diet. There are going to be people that really have to dial it in or it's total misery. There are going to be people that thrive on like all meat all the time. There are going to be people that like really have to dial it in or they're like triglycerides fucking go through the roof, whatever. Everybody's going to be a little bit different. But if you know what your North Star is, you're looking at the right biomarkers, you can dial them in. But I will say, I really want to do a reality show where we lock people, identical twins. You might actually do this. I'm not going to. I wanted to for a while, but now I'm focused on a different part of entertainment. Take this idea and run. get identical twins, lock them in a house. We're going to lock them in a house for 6 months. And on one side, one identical twin is going to be in the vegan house. The other identical twin is going to be in the carnivore house. And we're going to take every blood marker that matters, and we're just going to feed these guys. Feed them, feed them, feed them. They can, I mean, we can pick whether we let them eat to satiety or we balance their calories, whatever. But vegan food, any way they want to do it, all meat all the time, any way they want to do it. We see at the end of 6 months based on how people feel, how they look, strength, biomarkers, and once and for all, because we got identical twins, baby. How did it play out? The other thing, I want coaches that are highly inflammatory, that really believe in their side, and I want them to come in and like be debating coach to coach. We need some drama, otherwise this isn't going to be interesting TV. And I think if you swap out the coaches enough, we'll be able to get all these different perspectives of people who really understand it, basically placing reputational bets on what this is going to look like at the end, who they think is going to win, what the biomarkers are going to be, all that. There will be nowhere to hide because these are locked in a house. There's nowhere to go. They cannot have things that we don't put in that house. So everybody knows exactly what they eat. Dude, I think that would be awesome.
That would be really entertaining.
Yes. Oh, 100%. I so want someone. And here's the punchline. Some of the twins, it won't matter. Other twins will really fare better on one or the other. And we will see that people will start squawking, oh, you didn't account for microbiome or whatever. Yeah. And what we're going to see is it's so complicated. It is so close to N of 1. Everyone needs to stop screaming. Find out what works for you. Test, test, test. Include what you enjoy so that you actually like the food that you eat. And if you're disciplined and consistent, you'll find the thing that works for you.
And you mentioned sort of this blind spot that people might have, right? So like with the vegan diet, maybe there's these foods that are amazing, that work just fine, but the blind spot maybe to a lot of people is maybe they're not sure what it's doing to their blood sugar, right? You said it without saying it, but when you become so myopic in a certain way of thinking with a particular diet, a lot of times you have these blind spots. You don't realize it, right? Like for me with keto for a long time, it was, okay, maybe my saturated fat intake was too high. And it was one of the reasons why I was still kind of flirting with insulin resistance a little bit there, right? Bring that down, things kind of improve, right? It's a blind spot though, right? Because you're focused on all the positives because here's your moral compass, here's your code, you're working towards it. So everything is satisfied in your being because you feel like you're working towards that. Still have blind spots, right? It's just like people that you love, or you have blind spots for yourself, your own personality, or maybe your spouse. Like you don't see a blind spot they might have because you love them through it and you just don't recognize it. So all these things exist. And what I've found is that being able to address these blind spots is really the only time when we can really look at sort of the evidence-based literature and say, okay, with this is as close to fact as we have. Still not fact, but it's going to be as close to fact. It's the only time that when you look back at like retroactively, because I always say like when you look at the evidence-based stuff, unfortunately you're living 10 or 15 years in the past because you just are. And that doesn't mean it's right, wrong, or the other. It just means that like by the time there's enough semi-conclusive data to say this works, this doesn't, we're on to the next thing, right? And I think that's the argument that a lot of people with a myopic view on any different singular diet or diet type or whatever will have, is they're saying, well, no, like this is new, there's this cutting edge. And that very well could be the case, like absolutely. Like there could be stuff with carnivore that's been like, yeah, that is 100% the case, like, or whatever. Vegan, same thing, keto, same thing, whatever. But if we can actually take a look at sort of the evidence-based piece and say, okay, well, what is this one piece that we know is pretty solid? And does that eliminate a blind spot, right? So carnivore, for example. Okay, there's evidence that suggests that high amounts of saturated fat, even on a carnivore diet, might not be the best thing when it comes down to hepatic triglycerides, like to liver fat. Taking
Are you
that,
talking down to me, Mr.
I'm talking down to you. Yes, I am. This is what I do. My wife says, like when I do this, she says, "Don't Thomas."
It's probably smart.
Don't Thomas DeLauer me.
That's
like so she kind of like whatever verbs me. But I guess the point is that it just hit so clear with the vegan thing, right? It's like, and I've noticed the same thing. Like there's nothing wrong with a lot of these vegan foods, except for the fact that like maybe blood sugar just isn't top of mind for them, right? Same kind of thing on the carnivore side is maybe they do need to reduce the saturated fat intake. Who knows, right? Maybe that's their one blind spot. But the reason that I mentioned that is because you said something that really stuck with me, and that was like kind of being an eternal learner, right? And I think that's where the buck sort of stops with a lot of sort of the myopic way of thinking with the diet tribes, right? Is they've stopped learning. They start living in an echo chamber. And that's where the things become problematic. And that's where it's really hard for them to break out of it, right? It's like until they have like a serious call to action that forces them to break out of it, or a really ugly breakup with it, right? And then it just kind of discourages them. That's why people can end up derailing. It's like they put so much emotional stock in this, and then they derail because they had a bad breakup with it, or they had something happen, some call to action that took their entire identity, their entire validity, their entire validation for everything, arguably even their moral compass, and flipped it over, right? And now who are they?
Yeah, tribal thinking is dangerous. You're so much closer to this particular problem that I hesitate to say what I'm about to say, but I'll say it anyway. It just feels a bit like sports to me. So my team is team vegan, my team is team paleo, my team is team keto, whatever. And you're just going out and supporting your team and yelling and screaming in the, on the sidelines and having a great time watching the debate play out. I don't begrudge people that. And I don't, look, again, you're so close to it, maybe people really are getting sort of caught up in the whirlwind of misinformation or whatever, but I don't worry about it too much. Like the honest answer is figure out what your goal is, measure, and test. So if you're trying to lose fat while maintaining low inflammation, then cool, find a doctor that can help you measure that stuff. Go try the thing, see how it works for you, see how you feel, be consistent. Like there's so much information out there, but people have to own it. They have to say, like for instance, I don't want fewer voices in the things that I'm trying to learn. I'll just completely own that I have to go figure out what's true. But at least I have competing ideas. What really worries me, we were talking about this, I'm really freaked out by what you said before we started rolling, that YouTube and the WHO and somebody else have like gotten together to decide what health information to show us. Bro, when we launched Quest, like there was this whole anti-fat campaign. And they were talking about like taxing high-fat foods more. And I was like, whoa, whoa, whoa. Like that was just crazy. You guys built a food pyramid. I do not want you anywhere near like taxing what food is good and bad, et cetera. It's like for everything that they get right around trans fat, like they're gonna get 100 other things wrong. And so I would just much rather there be a battle of ideas. Let me see the people out there, especially, I mean, you're in a business where it's like, bro, if you don't look good, you're not strong. If you're not aging well, if you look like 10 pounds of ass by the time you turn 50, I'm like, whatever he's doing, I'm not doing it, right? So it's like people are living their lives completely out loud, saying what they believe, and as long as they're not lying, it's like, hey, thank you everybody for running all of these N of 1 experiments so I can sit back at home and go, which one do I resonate with that I want to try? And I'm going to go try it. The fact that people want people they disagree with to be shut down, if you have that impulse, stop yourself. Not only is it counterproductive for you, it's dangerous. But if somebody wants to scream that, hey, these voices should be shut down, yeah, cool. I'm going to debate that idea. I'm not going to say that you should be shut down. Say it loud. Just don't stop me from coming in and explaining why I think that that is a suicide route.
Well, it's exactly how we grow. I mean, and it's just like, and it doesn't take crazy intellect to look at that, right? You can see that this is discussion. This is discussion. And when you have someone across the aisle and you're willing to reach across that aisle and have that discussion that might be difficult, or even when it's not an actual discussion, but it's to a camera about that person or about that type of diet or about whatever it is, that is essentially how we're going to grow and how we're going to be able to learn. And I think one of the problems that we end up creating when you start having these like elements of kind of control, even algorithmically, is then the echo chambers that we've created for ourselves become even more intense, because then the only people that are going to listen to you are the people that are already in your echo chamber, right? You're not able to actually reach across that aisle because now it just seems controversial. When even if it is controversial, it's controversy that needs to be had for people to form their opinion and for the cream to kind of float to the top, so to speak. So with this, how does someone that is trying to say, navigate their own look at this, what would you say, getting sort of practical about this, how does someone measure internally, aside from weight loss, if something is working for them? Like, do you have some metrics that you would use? Like, what do you do today where you say, this is how I want to eat. Like, there's a lot of people, believe it or not, that just don't know if the way they're eating is the right way to eat or not. Outside of the scale, outside of even blood work, right? Like, is this the right way? And I know it's a very odd question, but it's one that people actually have.
The most important metric for me is cognitive optimization. So am I feeling sharp? Am I sleeping well? All the things that are going to influence how rapidly I can think and how much I can get done and how much energy I have. So that's the first thing that I look at. If my energy is flagging, I start looking at, am I not working out hard enough? Am I eating something new in my diet? Or have I upped the quantity of something in my diet that maybe is causing a problem? Like, I went through a brutal bout of brain fog at one point. I thought I was losing interest in my business. It was crazy. I was so tired all the time. I was like, oh God, I don't want to do this. And then I was like, okay, if somebody came to you and described these symptoms, what would you tell them? And I would tell them, what are you eating a lot? Whatever it is you're eating a lot of, stop eating immediately. And I was like, the only thing I'm eating a lot of right now is pecans. I'm like, how, not even like roasted pecans, just like raw pecans. So I was like, okay, that's the advice I would give. Let's do it. Cut out pecans. 72 hours later, I was fine. I was like, holy. So you really do. You have to know what metric matters to you, and then you've got to steer by whether you're moving towards that. So for me, it's cognitive optimization. For somebody else, it might be adipose tissue. For somebody else, it might be strength, endurance, whatever. But trust the movements. And if something's going up or down, like another big one for me is inflammation. If my knees hurt, I'm like, whoa, what am I eating that's causing inflammation? So for instance, when I started experimenting with vegan food, I really fell in love. I was like, this food is amazing. And I was not looking at ingredients or anything like that. I was just like going hard on vegan food. And obviously not eating ice cream or cakes or cookies, just like normal foods. But I started feeling inflamed. So I was like, weird. So something, either maybe it's in sauces, maybe it's just a lot of corn now is getting into my diet, something that I'd never really thought of before. Whatever it is, but it's clearly elevating my blood sugar, which is causing an inflammation response. And so I was like, okay, well, that handy to know. And you do, I've been at this for so long now, that you just get to a point where you're so consistent, right? It's not like I will ever eat a bag of Skittles on a Tuesday, ever. So I'm not stepping way outside of my thing. So my normal routine. So if I start feeling differently, I know I've changed something somewhere, and I just need to think through what is the thing I've changed. And every now and then it's something surprising like pecans. So that would be my advice.
It's kind of interesting because people tend to find those kinds of things and sometimes get bashed for that, right? It's just because there's this world of...
Bashed in what way?
Well, think about it like this. In the same lens that there's like these myopic ways of thinking, there's also this like opposite issue that we have in the health industry, or at least in the nutrition world, where there's this overgeneralization, where it's almost not giving any thoughtful acknowledgement to the fact that there are these little individual things that affect people. The pecans, for instance, like under that theory, there's a lot of like, oh, well, it's just, the pecans aren't really causing inflammation for you. They're not causing this issue. It's just a matter of you're eating too much. It's the calories in, calories out equation, which we all know is important. Thermodynamics is important, but like there's this other situation where there's these
That's really still a thing.
It's absolutely still a thing.
That it doesn't matter at all. I'm not talking about getting fat. It doesn't matter at all what calories you intake. Or are they just talking about fat storage?
Oh no, there's all kinds of, like, so for example, if you eat food, it's going to be inflammatory, period, right? So under that discussion, it's like, well, all food is inflammatory. So there's no such thing as an inflammatory food. When in reality, for a lot of people, there is such thing as an inflammatory food. But being able to break that down further, it's like if it doesn't have a clinical diagnosis behind it. Mm-hmm. So people have intolerances to gluten all the time. And there's actually somewhat of a sliding scale in levels of intolerance. You're either celiac or you're intolerant, and that intolerance scale is very wide, right? There's people that are mildly intolerant, very intolerant. Bottom line is there are people that are intolerant to gluten. But if you're not celiac, then people are going to say, well, how is gluten actually impacting you? Almost gaslighting in that sense.
You can represent the community. You know them far better than I do. Let's start at the extreme end of calories don't matter. Do they think that it's psychosomatic when somebody dies from eating a peanut?
I don't think they think it's psychosomatic.
Okay, so we can all agree that you're having an autoimmune response to the composition of the item that you ate.
Correct.
Okay, so we know not only does the composition of the things you eat matter, it can kill you.
Yeah.
Okay, so that's where I'm like, is this whole argument really about just storing fat? Because if that's all anybody's talking about, sure, calories, even that I still have trouble with, I'll be honest, because I see calories as signaling molecules that tell your body to up-ramp metabolism, down-ramp metabolism, which I mean, does anybody argue against that? Like, if I starve you for long enough, do we all agree that your metabolism will slow down?
Absolutely.
Okay.
Well, I think most of us do, yeah.
Right, so yeah, this is one of those arguments where I have a feeling this is just a tribal game, where it's like, if you focus narrowly enough on like one sort of definition of what I'm saying, like this is whatever the first law, second law, third law, I forget which law of thermodynamics it is, that, you know, obviously whatever energy goes into the system is either going to stay in the system or come out. Like those are your options. But once you start getting into, okay, but the microbiome, maybe holding on to more or less, like you could have something that triggers diarrhea, which surely gives you less time to absorb the nutrients. And there's just so many factors.
Yeah, you could go forever. You could go forever. But when you look at like the arguments that we have, like we still have people literally defending like all walks of ultra processed food, right? Like it's just like, and when I say that,
in what way are they defending it?
Calories in, calories out, doesn't matter.
For fat.
Right?
I just want to be clear. They're narrowing the conversation down to that.
The conversation is narrowed there for the sake of social
Would
media in a lot of
they
ways.
say, so that I can understand, would they say that if you eat a diet consisting entirely of Twinkies, that the membranes of your fat cells will be just as supple as if you ate, pick their favorite fat, just olive oil, just beef, whatever? Or do they acknowledge, no, if you're eating, because I'm assuming Twinkies have trans fats in them, that eating trans fats doesn't matter. It doesn't have any impact on, and if I'm wrong about the cellular membrane, that nothing is affected.
Yeah, I think when you get down to a mechanistic side, you're going to come up against a lot of opposition there. There's going to be people that are really
They'll say that at the cellular level, there's no
absolutely,
difference.
there's a lot of people that say that because
so, hold on,
we have
if I can just ask the question one more time. Sorry, I know it's your show.
No.
You brought on another YouTuber.
I like
this is your fault. So if we have over on this side 2 trays, biopsies of human flesh, and one of the biopsies, they ate entirely Twinkies. And whatever section you want, I mean, a cross-section of everything. So you've got fat cells, you've got mitochondria, you've got muscle tissue, all of it. All they ate was Twinkies for the last 10 years. This person, and they eat the same number of calories, just to keep it nice and easy. And this person only ate Wagyu beef. I biopsy them. You won't be able to some people will say you can't tell the difference.
A lot of people will say that's in vitro, it doesn't matter.
Has anybody tried that? Because I actually don't know. It just my hypothesis would be that it would be self-evident. But I could be wrong. I don't know.
It should be self-evident, and my hypothesis would be that as well for the most part. But when you actually, unless there are going to be some kind of randomized human control study, that you have that human randomized study, it's almost impossible to talk about that stuff sometimes.
Do we really need to randomize it? Because so many people eat a high
In my opinion,
processed.
we don't. But this is exactly my point, is we've had this resigning to the fact that if it is not in a human trial, it's not safe to talk about it. That is exactly what has come out in the overgeneralization aspect. It's not safe to say...
What are they worried is going to happen?
Who knows? But that's,
they don't articulate.
And that's exactly my point, is like we sit here and we overgeneralize this without anything conclusive, because people are afraid sometimes to have these difficult conversations. So instead we back up and we overgeneralize. And I'm not saying scientists are doing this. I'm saying this is the theme of what goes on the internet, right? It's difficult because you can't argue with that, because no matter which way you hit that, it's going to come back to, okay, well, it's just a biopsy or a cross-sectional area that's in vitro. Not everything's going to be the same. You and I both know that mitochondria are affected, the cell membrane is affected by things. And there's not enough human data in the world to suggest that, okay, if we look at this side and we look at this side's been eating Twinkies, this side's been eating Wagyu beef. Unless we had literal human studies on that, it would be very difficult for someone to make a claim that way. So we live in a world right now where everyone is sort of afraid to make a claim, and in an effort to sort of back up that fear, it's generalized. So I'm not saying that they're going to come at it and they're going to say, go ahead and eat as many Twinkies as you possibly can. But they are going to absolutely say that, hey, we should not be concerned with this because we have a bigger problem at hand. People need to lose the weight, get the inflammation down, and do this via, whatever method, generally going to be coming down to the basics of it, which is just going to be caloric restriction, because it's the simplest thing to lean on that we probably have the most evidence on. We have that evidence, and that's great, and that means a lot, but that doesn't deny the fact that there's other going on. And that's where it gets scary, because we have a hard time talking about it, because a lot of times these things get sort of shut down, right? Mm-hmm. It's like, just because there's not enough human data. So my point is not that that's right or wrong to say that calories in, calories out matters or doesn't matter. It's that when we start leaning so heavily on just an overgeneralization, the complete opposite of being totally myopic and saying, okay, well, carnivore works because of XYZ, vegan works because of XYZ, keto works because of XYZ. We just scrap it all and we just say, it. It's only this. And that overgeneralization is going to harm people, in my opinion, too. Because then people stop having the focus, they stop having the direction, and they just kind of resign to this, and they start thinking that any nutrient is okay as long as they're getting basic fundamental needs met. And like as far as calories are concerned. Again, we know that not to be the case. We know that's not, at least we can say that we know that it's not the case, right? We don't 100% know. Who knows? Maybe it is. We don't know everything.
Yeah, I mean, at this point, I just have a hypothesis. It just seems like, it seems self-evident to my layperson's mind that if you are what you eat and your tissues are literally made from the things you consume, then what the things you consume are is going to matter. It just seems self-evident, unless the body is some sort of magical alchemical plant that is not impacted by the substrates that it takes in, which seems utterly impossible. I mean, look, I'm always open to being wrong. So if I am wrong about this, oh, okay, cool. Like I don't need to be right. I just find it fascinating that this is like the argument.
Well, I don't think it's the argument. I think that it is an argument that...
What's the argument?
I think the argument is, when you come back from a fat loss perspective, they try to lean into the calories in, calories out scenario because it's the easiest to get across, and generally speaking, independent of all the psychological factors, satiety factors, this and that, yes, people generally need to eat less and move more.
To lose fat.
Yeah, right? Now, there's going to be a number of different things that happen cellularly as a result of that too. Not just losing fat, but being in a deficit in general. So it's very easy, like even just yesterday, I had, Lane Norton, who's a good friend. Like, we talked about this, and we disagree on a lot of things, but he did put it pretty eloquently, where he was just like saying, like, yeah, even these things that are not good in excess, i.e. saturated fat, i.e. sugar, when you're in a deficit, they're somewhat offset, right? It's easy to take that to the bank and say, okay, all the masses, is it easier just to educate the masses and tell them to eat less and move more because it's going to solve all their problems? Is it easier that way? Is it right? I don't know, but is it easier that way? And it's that overgeneralization. Is it a shortcut? And is that shortcut actually going to harm people? Or do we need to, because we're coming back to the whole content discussion here and kind of like the different people being able to argue and have this, right? This is exactly why, because if we resign and we don't let this argument happen, then we just let this overgeneralization float to the top, where people are just left to their own devices and we're right back to square one.
Yeah, it's interesting. So I'll keep going with this, fully recognizing I'm a layperson and your audience will know a lot more about it than I do, but I have some intriguing questions I would love answers to. So if it's true that the dose makes the poison, it seems telling to me that there are certain things that I can perturb ever so slightly and cause massive problems in your diet. In your body. So if you let me fuck with your blood sugar and pump a lot of glucose into your system, I'm gonna be able to mess you up quick. Whereas I'm probably gonna have a lot harder time messing you up by giving you chicken breast. So, not saying I can't mess you up with chicken breast, but I'm going to guess I've got to work real hard to mess you up by force feeding you chicken breast. And so I'm very curious if people say, no, it literally doesn't matter. If you're trying to fatten somebody, as long as you get them to swallow the same number of calories of chicken breast, which they will have a hard time doing as sugar, but as long as you get them to swallow the same calories, all the same metabolic functions are going to take place. I'd be super curious to know if that's true. My instinct is it would not be, that I could perturb your system pretty fast.
Yeah, I wouldn't see people doing that. I think it's because it's one of those things where obviously you've got the thermic effect of protein, all that's going to be different too. So again, yes, we know based on what we've seen that sure, when someone ingests protein, it's not the same as 100 calories of protein is not going to be the same as 100 calories of sugar. But also, protein is not going to be a direct immediate fuel source. So I mean, when you alter someone's blood sugar, you're altering all kinds of different signaling pathways that could cause them to die, right? Ingesting protein, although you could impact blood sugar through gluconeogenesis, it's going to be hard, right? It's going to be hard. So like over ingesting protein, I'm sure there are people out there that could kind of make that discussion, right? That it's like, okay, yeah, there's going to be an argument there that if you ingest too much chicken, it's going to clog up your kidneys and you're going to keel over dead, or you're going to dehydrate yourself so much by ingesting something that's has a diuretic effect. I'm sure there's people out there, but I don't think that's the general theme of what is going on out there. I don't think people are comparing sugar to chicken. If they are, then I think that's a pretty isolated group of people, because I think most people, whether it's going to be animal-based or plant-based, I think most people tend to lean in the protein camp these days. Now, that is one good thing that's come from a lot of the discussion that's happened, right? Because even 5, 6, 7 years ago, even then, the protein discussion was actually a little bit of nebulous territory, where people were still like, is protein really that good? Is protein really that bad? How much do we need to have? Now, I mean, if you look on the internet, the common theme is across the board that protein's pretty good, right? My concern is that if we start getting away from these discussions and being able to have that, are we going to have that growth? Are we going to be back where we were 10 years ago, where we're kind of questioning protein and we're kind of wondering how much we need and this and that? So there are certain things that can impact your lipids and impact your sugar and impact your energy and your AMPK and all these signalings, right? That's going to be trans fats. It's going to be fats in general. It's going to be sugar. Protein is kind of in an independent silo, where I don't think it's probably a lot harder to overfeed protein from both a body composition standpoint and like a cardiometabolic or just metabolic standpoint in the first place. So with that, that's a hard one to compare, right? Sugar to protein.
Yeah, for me, it's just trying to break apart what exactly people think of when they're trying to figure out why this conversation matters. And if they're just talking fat accumulation, that's one conversation. But for me, because my North Star is about cognitive optimization, the argument that a calorie is a calorie has always seemed just absurd, because I feel so differently if I have a high glucose diet versus if I have a high protein diet. Or a high-fat diet for that matter. In fact, a high-fat diet, when done poorly, is the most miserable of all. And so it just showed me that that what I'm eating matters a lot.
Yeah, and that's where I think I saw something recently. I can't remember where it was posted, but it was breaking down, kind of pointing fingers at sort of the bioindividuality discussion, right? And that was exactly the kind of, now this isn't something that's gaining a lot of like mainstream notoriety. No one's saying like bioindividuality does not exist. But there are some groups of people that still like to think that there isn't even that much of a degree of bioindividuality with what we eat. Now, that being said, if you eat a peanut and you go into anaphylaxis, clearly there's bioindividuality. And that is exactly everybody's point, right? But there's all these micro scales that we just don't measure, or we can't measure, right? We just don't know the answer to. But we do know that you are probably going to respond differently to a pecan than I would respond to a pecan, and you might respond entirely different to eating a chicken breast than I would be eating a chicken breast, which is exactly why it's so hard to talk about diet in a world that doesn't seem like you can openly talk about it. Because there's just going to naturally be people that resonate with it, like you mentioned earlier. Like, that's the beauty of what we do, right? People don't have to agree with what I say, but if what I am articulating resonates with them in a certain way where they're able to apply it and have success with it, that matters, right? They don't have to agree with every single thing I say. And there can be people that don't agree at all with what I say or with what you say. And that's the beauty of it. Like, we're not trying to make everybody happy. But I guess my theme with all of this is maybe we're trying so hard to make it accessible and make everybody happy that we're taking that individuality out of the equation, and that individuality is what the people need in order to feel like they're liberated to make the choices they need to make for them, when it comes to nutrition at least.
It's a complex game.
It's a lot. So if you get angry when you walk through my gym, once again, what compelled you to launch a food brand? Like, was it something that you said, like, hey, I want to do this because I hated this part of it and I want to make the food part easier? Or what drove you to start Quest in the first place?
This is a really complicated question. I'll give you a nutshell version, and if you want to push on anything, we can. So you have to go back a couple years before we launch it. I am profoundly unhappy with our previous company, which was a security software company. I was absolutely miserable. I wanted to feel alive, more creative. And so I actually go in and quit. And I'm like, guys, I can't do this anymore. Here's your equity back. I'm gonna move to Greece. That was the plan. Move to Greece with my wife. I'm gonna write a screenplay and just do something that I know will make me feel alive. Because what I had realized at that point was the money couldn't be guaranteed. Success couldn't be guaranteed, but the struggle could. Whatever we were gonna do was gonna be hard. And so we had up to that point been asking one question: what would you do if you knew you couldn't fail? And I was just like, that's the wrong question. The right question is, what would you do and love every day, even if you were failing? And so that really began to shift my perception of what I should be pursuing. And so I quit, and the guys who ended up becoming my partners at Quest were like, whoa, you caught us off guard. Like, hold on, we actually feel the same way. Like, what would it look like for us to keep working together? And we brainstormed this idea, and three of us, for three very different reasons, were drawn to health and fitness. For me, it was growing up in a morbidly obese family. I was like, whoa, I know I need to have meaning and purpose in whatever I do. And so I need to be fighting for something bigger than myself. It needs to be something I care about. It needs to be something I'm enthusiastic about. And look, I am very enthusiastic about transformation. And so for me, going on the journey of adding muscle and losing fat was the ride of a lifetime. It's absolutely incredible. I want it for everybody. It's super important. No matter how angry the gym makes me, I keep working out. It's a daily part of my life. So that is the backdrop of all this. So I showed up for my mom and my sister. I was like, cool, I'm gonna make food that they can choose based on taste, and it happens to be good for them. And so I have a thesis in life, especially for entrepreneurs: don't try to change people's behavior, try to leverage it. So we knew that they were gonna eat cookies, cake, candy bars, that kind of stuff. So we're like, let's take that class of junk food and make it healthy. And so I came to it every day with that in mind. So when I was under a piece of equipment at 2 a.m. on a Friday, which is a real story, with bloody knuckles from trying to repair like this heat coupling thing, which is ridiculous. I should never have been me, but it is what it is. And so in trying to do that, in that moment, I was so like, all my friends are out goofing around, partying, or asleep. And here I am, with a bunch of thugs trying to repair this piece of equipment. And I was like, okay, I'm not here for the money. I'm here for my mom and my sister. And so that really allowed me to move forward. And then being business savvy, I knew that the other two guys were super into this as well. And when you've got three people that are into the same thing and you can capture that energy, now you're really gonna be able to do something. And so in an alternate universe, I don't do a nutrition company. I go straight to the studio. But the way that it played out, given the reality of the circumstances, that I had two other guys that I thought we could really do something special together, it made sense to pursue that. And I felt I could show up every day and be passionate and love it, because I love helping people change. Like that is the core of my existence. Impact, I never need to work again after we sold Quest. So this is about like, what do I want the meaning and purpose of my life to be? And I want to help people. My company's now called Impact Theory, because it's my theory on how to impact people at scale. But it was the same thing at Quest, the same different people that I thought of, helping them in a different way through nutrition in the body. But then on the other side, now I'm trying to help people through their minds. But same idea, right? Like through a laundry list of very fortunate events, reading the right books, meeting the right people, failing at the right things, being awash in shame at the beginning of my marriage that I wasn't leading my now wife where she deserved to be. All of that stuff led me to a radical transformation in my own life. And I was like, whoa, the only thing that separates me from people that haven't had my kind of success or are still, depressed like I was, it's a little exaggeration, but close enough. It's just a set of ideas. And so how can I get these ideas out there? And that's why I actually started what now is impact theory while I was still at Quest, and it was called Inside Quest. And I was trying to help people understand what we were like inside Quest. Like, what was it? Because everybody saw us as a protein bar, but we saw ourselves as like mindset, being driven, being hardcore, pushing harder than the next person. And so I wanted people to understand it's these ideas that gave birth to Quest. And you can use them as readily as we can, and it will help you build whatever your next thing is.
Interesting, man. If you had to do it all over again, knowing what you know now, is there anything you would have done different?
How far are you gonna let me go back?
10 years.
Ooh, 10 years, we're already still in the thick of Quest. Prior to Quest. Yeah, I would have gone straight into film. So what I didn't fully understand at that time was that I can get good at anything. And so just as I got good at nutrition, I've now gotten good at media, I've now gotten good at building video games. It's like I've now pointed myself at so many different things. I got good at building a software company. I got good at building a manufacturing company in nutrition. I got good at marketing. I got good at public speaking. Right? Like point myself at something, and over enough time, I will get good at it. And so I didn't know that at the time. And so I was very afraid to just go to the thing I wanted to do and be like, yeah, I'm going to eat for years, but I'll be able to figure it out. And at least then I'll have made all the contacts I needed. So the number of people, when I left Quest, all my offers were come be a CEO of another nutrition company. And I won't rat them out publicly, but there were some big names that were like, hey, come run XYZ company. And I was like, no. I'm not going to get sucked in again. I now am fortunately in a place where I actually have the money to do the thing I want to do. Where if I'm doing anything I don't enjoy, it is nobody's fault but my own, because I have hand constructed this company to be the meaning and purpose that I want to add to the world, but very specifically in the exact way that I want to do it. Which is what I was actually trying to convey when I said that I got angry walking through there, was because my thing is when I walk through my office, because as I came in, I was like, oh my God, this is his office. This would drive me fucking crazy. I was like, my office is people building video games. And so, when I'm walking down the row of like all the equipment and stuff that we have, it's like computers that could launch the space shuttle. These things are so beefy and robust. I hear people playing a new video game, or I see a new piece of art that we're developing or whatever. And look, it was hard as hell. It still is hard. But being in the world of that, I fucking love it, man, so much. As I hope you love when you see the equipment and you smell the mats and you think about holding the iron in your hand and when you feel those calluses on your hands, right? That all of those things are like, man, I've become the man I want to be. That's how I feel when I'm in storytelling. Like if this were 10,000 years ago, I'm not the greatest hunter in the village. I'm the storyteller. I'm the one that explains why the hunt matters, right? I'm the one that designs tattoos that everybody's gonna get, that bonds us together because they mean something, right? That's what I'm built for. And of course, that was the role that I played at Quest, and that's the role that I play at every company that I will ever build, is I'm the storyteller. And so which PS is very good if you're the CEO of something, to be able to galvanize people around an idea. And so now I'm expressing those ideas that are so powerful, but I hide them in a video game. I hide them in a comic book. But the thing that I hold myself accountable to is if a character in one of our games or comic books or movies or whatever, if they give you advice, it's real advice. Like you can actually use it. And we're going to be announcing a big partnership in January probably, and people will instantly get, oh, I see. That partner tells me everything about what you're trying to do.
Interesting. So were you telling a story with Quest and the food itself?
Of course.
So every time someone, subconsciously sort of like took a bite of that, I mean, they were getting the story?
Yeah, that you can do anything you set your mind to. That's why we became a company galvanized around the word you hate, transformation. So that's what we were. We called it mirror marketing. We just want to show the customer themselves and what they've achieved and what they're cooking with our food and all that. And so we wanted to be a place where it was like, look, anybody, if you're the person that's embarrassed to go into a gym, we got you, right? We were focused on food porn. It wasn't veins and chains. It was like really trying to be like, this is about loving food, but wanting to be healthy, not wanting to have to give things up. My wife has this incredible story. So when we made the cookies, this woman ended up writing Lisa, because she did all of our YouTube content, wrote into Lisa and was like, my son, I can't remember if he had celiac, something like that, where he couldn't have normal cookies and stuff like that. And she said, I always have to tell my son no at a birthday party, or, when people look at what he has in his lunchbox, like he never has cookies and stuff, and they all do. And he feels so excluded, so on the outside. And she said, you making this cookie made me feel like a better mom. And that was always one of those where I'm like, that's why I'm under this machine at 2 a.m. on a Friday with bloody knuckles, is for moments like that.
And so if you had to build Quest from the ground up now, knowing what you know now, would it look any different?
It would have to. So this is the thing. I will literally, if anybody wants to know how we built it, I won't hold back a trick. I'll tell you everything that we did. The problem is it won't work for you. And the reason it won't work for you is timing is everything. Like when you have a company growing that fast, you got the right thing at the right time, packaged in the right way. And so you can't miss any of those. You can't have the right product at the wrong time. You can't have the right timing and the wrong packaging. Like you really have to have all of it happen at the right moment. And what happened was just a trifecta of things. Nobody had ever made a bar that actually tasted like it had sugar but didn't. Brands weren't using social media before we were. Brands weren't using influencers before we were. And the world was waking up to the fact that sugar was the villain. We couldn't control any of those, but we could leverage all of them. And so for some astute reasons and some just lucky timing, we got it all right at exactly the right time. And as the one that was championing social media, I didn't do it because I was like, oh my God, this is going to be brilliant. This is going to allow us to eclipse everybody. What I said was, this will let us find our 1,000 true fans. I think that's really going to matter in this new era where information is traveling so quickly. We can be who we really are, so we can build this around like mindset and all that, and like showing people transformation. It's going to let us do that. But we didn't know how big it was going to be. We always thought this could be a major food company. But the one thing I think, if we're all being honest, we didn't expect it to happen that fast. It was a rocket ship.
Now, follow up. Having the resources you have now and knowing what you know now through building Quest, would your weight loss look any different? Would how you went about that?
Yeah, for sure. Now, whether I would, like if you look at somebody like you that really knows this stuff and like you're in it every day, would you do it far easier than I? Probably. But like now I've got so many, like fat loss never scares me. Like after the holidays, I'll be probably 6 or 7 pounds heavier than I am the rest of the year. And I won't be afraid at all. I'll be able to drop it very easily. For me, caloric restriction is very simple to do if you let me intermittently fast.
Interesting.
Just don't have a problem. Because then I can eat food. I'll eat food probably 5 or 6 hours before I go to bed, but I'll have like 2 large-ish meals. So I'll still probably only be at like 1,900 calories. So I'm still a couple hundred calorie deficit for the day. But I do it close enough to bed where I've digested the food, so I'll sleep well, but I'm also not hungry, so I'll sleep well. And so then I'll have a little bit of drag sort of in the late morning, getting into when I'll have my first meal. But it's very easy. I've done it so many times.
So you think, so everything has become easier for you now, knowing what you know.
For sure.
And it's funny because you said to me, okay, well, with your knowledge, then it might come easier. No, the more knowledge that you have, the more that you resign to the fact that you need to make it easier. Because there was a phase there for a while where it got more complicated because you learned so much and you want to like pull all these different levers. When you realize that the more you learn, the less you know, and you're never going to be done learning. Right. So you could sit there and end up with an infinite number of levers that you have to figure out what sequence you need to pull them, or you can just go with the biggest lever, which you kind of figured out too, right? It's like we could talk until we're blue in the face about blood sugar modulation. I know we're aligned on probably our theories behind health and a lot of that. Like we're both don't like sugar, we both intermittent fast, but at the end of the day, what are the biggest ways that you can pull those levers? And the biggest way that you can pull that caloric restriction lever, generally for people like us that are kind of on-off switch type people, I mean, it does make sense with intermittent fasting, right? So I'm doing the exact same thing. I can be a lot more, when I say lax on my diet, that doesn't mean eating sugar, it doesn't mean eating garbage, but I can be a lot less sort of anal retentive about everything that I ate or eat if I can just apply that, right? But 2-3 years ago, it's like the more that you learn, then you're trying to juggle this, you're trying to juggle that. And I think that's where people get lost too. So it's good to hear you say that, because I think that lets people kind of rest easy that, hey, like for someone that has a lot of difficulty, even getting into the gym as far as just like mustering sort of the motivation or the want to be there, it still comes pretty easy for you to lose weight, right? Because that's the biggest problem that people have. Is like, how do I still lose fat or lose weight in the face of something that I don't like, that I can't stand? And you just kind of put it right there, plain and simply. That it's just, once you have the tools, it's just applying it, right?
No doubt.
So with that, man, I mean, where can everyone find you? I know you're everywhere, so it's pretty easy, but...
At Tom Bilyeu, across all socials. YouTube is for sure my number one. And then we have Impact Theory University. Those would be the two places.
Nice, man. Well, as always, keep it locked in. And Tom, thanks, my man.
Thanks for having me.